Today's presentation is brought to you by NC State IES, and now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Vigna for today's presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, Susan mentioned we're going to have a Q&A in there. Feel free to drop questions in as we go, and I'm going to try and stop maybe halfway once or twice to look at those questions and see if there's anything we want to talk about. I don't want to save everything for the end. If you have a question that's specific to one of these slides or something that I talk about in here, feel free to drop that in the chat, and I'll try and stop periodically so we can look over those. So we're here today to talk about cybersecurity, but more specifically, CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And we're going to talk about what that means for you as small businesses, as DoD contractors, and the upcoming impending date of November 10th, which is big on calendars for everyone who's been watching CMMC for the last 5, 6, 7 years that it's been kind of an ongoing process. So let's get started. Who am I? My name is Brian Vigna. I am a cyber specialist and educator. I work here at Industry Expansion Solutions. I've been here for about 7 years now. Before that, I worked with small businesses doing IT support. I taught in the community college system, teaching courses like Technology Support Specialist, Network Security, Security Plus, A Plus, Net Plus. So lots of experience in IT there. And I've also worked as a contractor with the federal government, with Department of State, Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, USAID. And what I did there was help implement a program called FedRAMP, which is works in tandem with CMMC. So lots of experience working with businesses, working with the government, now working kind of in between those two spaces. I've got a quote up here that I want to share with you. I have always loved this quote. It's really kind of describes what the internet is all about today and what it's been about since the beginning. This guy, Vinton Cerf, is one of the founders of the internet. He helped to invent TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol. So those IP addresses that we all use, this guy literally helped to create them 40, 50 years ago. The wonderful thing about the internet is that you're connected to everyone else. The terrible thing about the internet is that you're connected to everyone else. So it is both a magic tool that we all have at our disposal that allows us to do all sorts of awesome things. But of course, when you open that door into your phone, into your home, into your business, you are also opening that door for communications to come back in. And those aren't always the communications we want to be coming in. So what are we going to cover? What is CMMC? We're going to go over that briefly, and then we're going to talk about the latest updates on CMMC. We'll cover the why, right? So why did they even have to come up with CMMC? What did it come out of? What was the impetus of this program? What is it? So why does it exist? What is the program's goals? Who is involved? What are the different levels? We'll talk about the final rule. That's really the big thing, is that it is actually a real law now. And then we'll talk about action plans and resources. So how you can actually get started at whatever level you may be. You may be a company that is exploring DoD contracting. You may be a company that's been doing DoD contracting for many years. You may be a company that's not sure if you want to continue to do it based on this new certification process. So we'll try and go over all those things. And again, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll stop periodically. So the why, understanding the threat. First off, we have to understand, why did the federal government even decide that they need this standard? Is it necessary? Well, I wanted to show you some trends and statistics. This is a chart that you'll see over here. This graphic is from just the last 2 months, so it's updated information. And the top threats on there are AI-driven malware, AI-enhanced password cracking, ransomware as a service, supply chain attacks, shadow IT, which is simply the idea of people adding IT devices that are not approved or recognized by their organization, and then IoT, Internet of Things device vulnerabilities, right? All those new sensors, embedded devices, wireless cameras, IP devices in our networks, they are a vulnerability. And then deepfakes. So what's going on? AI is enhancing attacks. AI is relatively new, but what it can already do really well is help to customize and personalize phishing messages. It makes it harder to identify. Everyone here probably remembers maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we were getting messages that were filled with typos, mistakes. It was clearly written by a person in a foreign language who was not a native English speaker. It made it really easy to identify as a phishing message, and not only for us as humans to identify with our own eyes, but for services like our Google or Gmail, it could easily identify based on keywords, typos, and all the things that they were doing wrong. What's changed is that those attacks are just getting harder and harder to identify, both by us, regular people, and of course by the services that are designed to protect us. You'll also see that RAAS, that is ransomware as a service. If you haven't heard of that term before, ransomware, of course, is the idea of getting into someone's network or system, using encryption to lock it down, and then demanding payment to get back into that system. And this has been happening for years. The difference is now it's as a service, which means you can buy a ransomware toolkit that is hosted by someone else somewhere in the world. They pre-build it for you, and you really don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge to use it. So pretty much anyone who has a PayPal account or a Venmo or can pay with Bitcoin, they can go online, they can buy access to this ransomware as a service and pay a monthly fee or even a one-time fee and then choose their target. So this is important because it means that no longer do you need technical expertise. It means that more people who want to get involved in this can do it easily. What are attackers trying to do? There are some companies that spend a lot of time researching what the biggest attacks last year were. And this is one of the big things that Palo Alto's Unit 42, which is one of the most advanced cybersecurity detection and protection companies in the world, they said that companies found that they weren't just attacking to get in and to try and get money like through ransomware. They were also focused on disrupting businesses to create maximum pain. And there's a variety of reasons why they're doing this. Researchers think that the more they disrupt the business, the more likely people are to just go ahead and pay the ransom. So instead of encrypting one device or one server, they wanted to get into every single desktop, every single laptop, and infect all of those devices, shut down everything inside of, let's say, a factory or whatever environment, a hospital, a healthcare place. And they want to cause as much pressure as possible to pay that ransom. So using phishing messages, they'll start to send messages that say, we are going to share information with your competitors or with your partners or with the federal government. So we're even seeing attacks where companies are saying, if you don't pay a ransom, we'll report that your cybersecurity wasn't up to snuff or you weren't complying with regulations that said you should have had a certain type of cybersecurity. We're also seeing the time from initial breach to ransomware action is getting shorter and shorter. So the detection time is more important than ever because the time from initial breach until exfiltration of data is now about 1 hour. So in the past, companies would see that an attack happened, and then there would be a long period of idle where those attackers would be inside your network and they'd want to be quiet, they'd want to be monitoring, learning about the network, and then maybe they would attack after days or even weeks. Now we're seeing that attack can be done in an hour. So who is it that wants to attack us? Well, there's all sorts of answers. Just yesterday, I read a story about Iran. Iran is using ransomware as a service, and just this week, they published on lots of databases and websites that can be seen by anybody out there on the internet. They put a bounty on attacking the United States and Israel. So Iran said that they would give an additional payment to anyone who proved that they attacked either of those two entities. Here's another one, Volt Typhoon. This is a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group who admitted that this group exists. Oftentimes, these companies or these countries will not want to admit that these are real, but China has actually come out and admitted that Volt Typhoon is one of their own state-sponsored hacking groups. What have they gone after specifically? Volt Typhoon has focused on critical infrastructure and the manufacturing supply chain, as well as a bunch of other things like construction, government, IT, maritime, and energy. Last year, it was discovered that Volt Typhoon had had access to a major water system in the US, controlling that system without actually doing anything wrong. They were in there to research, understand, and learn more about it so that they could attack again in the future. And they were there for 300 days before it was discovered. So they are searching up and down the supply chain for the weakest links. They're not just looking at the biggest defense contractors. They're not going after Northrop Grumman. They're going after small businesses like the ones that exist here in North Carolina. They want to disrupt our critical infrastructure. They want to learn about our critical infrastructure, and they want to learn what to do if they choose to attack in the future. So we don't know exactly what their goal is right now. We know that they want to, damage the United States. They want to hurt our GDP, but we don't know exactly why they're studying all of our critical infrastructure and what that might mean in the future. So economic harm, certainly. Disrupting our military is certainly on there. Service outages causing disrest and confusion. So how can we fight against them? Of course, we'll talk about this more, but software updates, multi-factor authentication, and following things like the NIST framework that we'll talk about today. So a growing supply chain and Internet of Things risk. Another thing that I found in IBM's annual risk report and cyber threat report, that rapid cloud adoption was listed as one of their top vectors for attack. So what does that mean? Rapid cloud adoption is this idea that companies are saying, hey, we have all these network devices, we have all this data, we have these new dashboards that we're able to view on our smartphones and tablets. So we want to be able to put all that stuff in the cloud. We want our data in the cloud. We want analytics coming from things that are on assembly lines going into the cloud so we can quickly access from anywhere in the world. Well, of course, the problem with that is that all of those devices, all of those IoT, Internet of Thing devices, have IP addresses, and they either have security or don't have security. Often, one of the biggest concerns is access management misconfigurations. What that means is when you first purchase these devices and install them into your network, you're given a choice of how to secure them, what level of security they have, and it's on you to set up usernames, passwords, access control lists, etc. And of course, folks are just throwing those in there. They're hoping for the highest functionality and the quickest use of those new tools. And so in a lot of cases, it is literally that we are plugging in devices and we are not changing the configuration of those devices. If you think back to 10, 15 years ago, this was a huge problem with home routers. For a long time, anyone who purchased a home router from an ISP, right, like Comcast, for example, in the Northeast, one of the biggest providers, they gave everyone the same router with a sticker on the bottom, and the passwords were things like admin for the username and admin1234 for the password. So this same thing is happening right now in the IoT world. People are getting devices and they are not changing those configurations. So the other thing to think of here is it is a major hurdle for small IT teams to manage all these different devices that use a different type of security. They all are operating in a different way. They all have their own interface. They all rely on their own security standards. And so for IT folks who have traditionally just had desktop computers, laptop computers, printers, maybe a wireless access point, and then a router that connects you out to the internet, now they've got a patchwork of different devices that operate different ways, that have different ways to log into them, to access them remotely. And of course, that's creating a big headache for IT folks and for small businesses. So that's a little bit about the threat. Let's talk about what CMMC is, the program itself. So first off, what does it protect? There are two things it's designed to protect, and these are important because these dictate what level of CMMC that you need. So the first one, the lowest level, is federal contract information. This is information not intended for public release, generated under a government contract. In fact, this one is so simple, it is literally that you have a contract with the federal government. So if you have a DoD contract right now, you don't have to look any further. You are going to be CMMC level 1 at minimum, right? Because you have federal contract information. The tougher one to define is CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. This is a relatively new term. It's only been around for about 10 years, but CUI is stuff that is not meant to be out there for the public. So for example, if your business creates technical drawings that are shared with the government as part of your contract, or vice versa, the government creates technical drawings that are shared with you. Let's say, for example, you create a small part of a drone, a very small part of a drone, but in order to know where that part will fit onto the drone itself, you have those technical drawings, you have those schematics or engineering data, or it could be coding data, right? Actual lines of code. Any of those items would mean that you have CUI as part of your contract, and this would make you a CMMC level 2 candidate, okay? CUI is much tougher to define, so we've got to look for clues. First off, our contract will tell us if we are level 2 or CUI in the near future. Primes are already asking their subs if they can handle level 2, if they are level 2 ready, if they're NIST 800-171 ready. So we're already seeing this trickle down. So where did CMMC come from? What was the impetus? Back in 2016, something called DFARS was introduced, and DFARS was all about creating a rule book, a set of standards for DoD contracts, right? If we're going to create a submarine and we're going to use top secret information, of course, the government should protect that information on their end. But if they're going to rely on contractors all around the country and small and mid-sized businesses, they figured out that they probably need to tell those companies that they need to have adequate cybersecurity as well. So that was what DFARS was all about. Contracts with DFARS required that we protect our data with NIST Special Publication 800-171. What is that? It is literally just a long list of controls, right? Those are practices that are administrative or technical in nature. For example, passwords must be a certain length and complexity. Users must use passwords to log in. We can't just have computers that when you walk up, there are no usernames and passwords. These are some simple examples of what's included in NIST Special Publication 800-171. The problem was it was a fully self-attested standard. So they rolled out this new standard and said, hey, if you want to work with the government, you've got to follow these rules. And by the way, you're just going to tell us if you follow the rules. So for about 5 years, 4.5 years, they were doing it this way. And then a bunch of internal surveys of the federal government itself and then of DoD contractors revealed that only a tiny percentage of companies were taking this seriously. And the analogy I like to use here is, imagine if we had speed limits for our cars out on the highway, but there were no police. That's what they did at first, right? So they said like, hey, we've got DFARs. There are no police, but there are speed limits. They said, okay, we actually want you to report if you're doing the right speed. So if you ever see that you're going too fast or you're driving recklessly, we need you to pull yourself over. Of course, this is not a good system. It did not work. And some of those studies found that less than 10% of companies were actually doing anything in terms of cybersecurity, forgetting about have full documentation, reporting that information, reporting when bad things happened, when breaches did happen. That was really not going on. So back in 2019, CMMC was announced. Now, it's been a long, winding road, but the initial goal was all we want to do is take DFARS, that's been around for a while, it's already in your contract, and we want to add teeth and enforcement. So CMMC changed compliance from a promise to proof. That's really what CMMC is about. So a lot of folks are struggling and saying, this is a burden on small business. It's not fair to us. Why do we have to suddenly comply and pay for all this fancy cybersecurity stuff? The reality is, if you have a current contract with the DoD, you are legally required to comply with NIST Special Publication 800-171. The issue is that without any sort of enforcement mechanism, that just wasn't happening. So when CMMC was first announced, there were 5 levels, and instantly feedback from the community was, it's just too complicated. Companies are going to struggle with which one of those levels they're in. They're going to struggle with moving from one level up to the next level. What are the differences? How do they know which one they should be aiming for? It was kind of a mess. So they quickly reverted to this 3 levels. And here's the 3 levels: foundational, intermediate, advanced. And here's how it works. The majority of contractors today will probably fall into level 1, something like 60%. Another 35%, maybe up to 39%, will fall into this level 2, and then whatever's left over will fall into level 3. For our purposes today, almost no one is going to be level 3. If you are level 3, you'll be working directly with the federal government and the DoD, and they will be telling you that you're level 3 and that you have to work with them directly. So we're not going to talk a lot about level 3 because it doesn't apply to almost anyone in this room. Level 1 and level 2. So here's the deal. Level 1 has 15 requirements aligned with the FAR, Federal Acquisition Requirement. It requires an annual self-assessment and an annual affirmation. What does that mean? You've got to check your own security, you've got to document your own security, and then you've got to submit a score that says, we are meeting all 15 of these requirements. Now, this is a little bit confusing, but within those 15 requirements, there are actually many more controls. So 15 is a little bit of a deceptive number. We'll get into it a little later what those controls look like. But again, things like, do you have locks on the front door of your office and your warehouse? Do you have a way to know who logged in and at what time they logged in? That's an auditing feature. So if you're level 1, you have a much less rigorous set of controls, and you also have the option for self-assessment and annual affirmation by yourself. You don't technically have to hire a third-party company. You don't have to have a third-party audit. That reduces costs, but it also leaves you on your own. If you don't have a strong IT department that understands this, they may struggle to do this, and it may still require you to use outside help. The DoD estimates the cost for level 1 to be around $6,000 ballpark, but there's a caveat, and it's a really important one. The caveat is that is just for the certification process. It's for the self-assessment and the annual affirmation. It does not include setting up a cybersecurity program and getting yourself up to speed with these requirements. And that's a sneaky way for the government to try and keep the costs low when they put out this public information. That's because they're saying you already agreed that you are complying with DFARS. We're assuming your security is good. That $5,000 to $6,000 is really just to get that documented, when we know the majority of companies are not actually complying, so the cost is much, much higher than that. Then we have level 2. Level 2 has 110 requirements, but again, if you drill down, there are 320-ish controls that are inside of there, so it's much more than 110. This requires a third-party certification every 3 years, and then a self-assessment after that. You can do annual affirmation each year after that initial assessment. Some of these will change over time. This is a phased rollout, this program. So right now, level 2 can self-assess, but in the future, they will have to use a third party. And what is this C3PAO? Certified Third Party Audit Organization, a C3PAO. Okay. So do we really need CMMC? Are we sure we need it? Well, the supply chain has 220,000 companies at minimum today. Every single business from top to bottom is part of that supply chain. And again, those nation state attackers, those organized criminals that are using things like ransomware as a service, they're smart. They are walking up and down and checking every window and door and saying, you know what, let's just go through the ones that are open. Why would we attack the biggest defense contractors? Why would we attack the federal government itself? Of course, they have a lot more money. They have a bigger budget to dedicate to cybersecurity. They have bigger staffs that are trained in this stuff. So they're getting smart and they're attacking smaller and smaller companies. So for a long time, companies who had 7 employees and made some small part that they sent off to the DoD thought, there's no way I need to worry about this. The reality is, every company should be thinking cybersecurity breaches are now one of our top concerns if we connect to the internet in any way. And the reality is, I can't think of a business today that doesn't connect to the internet or rely on network connectivity. So a survey from this year, companies were asked to report their readiness for CMMC. Companies reporting little to no readiness, more than half. Companies reporting no readiness, as in they literally don't have a cybersecurity program, they have no documentation, almost half. Companies who are close to being ready, 4%. Notice there are no companies that are 100% ready. That's not a thing right now, right? So more details. This is a survey that came out this month. This is an October 2025 study. So I wanted to get us the most up-to-date information I could possibly find because these reports are usually lagging indicators. They tell us what happened 6 months or a year ago. This is from this week. So according to this 2025 study, 69% of respondents in the DoD supply chain said that they are not ready, right? They're just not ready. They don't know what to do with their self-assessment. 30% have actually undergone validated assessments. That's good. That means at least 30% of those companies are saying, hey, we've had somebody look at our stuff and tell us if it's good or bad. 42% have actually submitted their score, which is a requirement, with a median score of 60. So it's good that they are submitting scores, but it's a pass or fail system. So the majority of them are submitting and saying, we're not actually ready. Only 27% of contractors, according to the study, are implementing multi-factor authentication. That's a huge red flag for a business because it's the best, easiest, and freest way to protect yourself, and it's also a requirement for CMMC. Out of the 80,000 defense contractors that need level 2, only 270 are currently CMMC certified. That's a shockingly low number. Now, the program is relatively new. There were lots of holdups, there were delays, there were changes in the people who were making the standards, in what those standards were, in release dates. All those things have been really flaky. So a lot of companies have ignored this or pretended it was never going to be real. But this is a shocking number. Only 270 are ready today. So let's look inside CMMC. I mentioned earlier, what are these controls? If you haven't used this term control before, it's really a rule or a set of practices. So here's the FAR clause that it's based on. Here are those 15 level 1 controls. So this means every single company who works with the DoD as a contractor must have these today, not in the future, not on November 10th when this goes into law, because this is really DFARS. This is before CMMC. So take a look at some of these. If you see they each have an access control number with them that they're associated with, they fall into what are called families. So you can see AC, that's access control. Physical is one of those control families. Auditing is one of those control families. They're different categories that you're going to need to look at as you go through your company and start to evaluate your cybersecurity. And often what people will do is say, let's take care of all the access control stuff, then we'll move on to physical, then we'll move on to auditing. So they kind of deal with them one family at a time. Those 15 controls actually include 59 distinct assessment objectives. So if we drill down into that first line, if we clicked on that, this is what we'd see inside of it. This is just the first one. So this is one single control. Technically inside of that control, here's the number of objectives. And if we go back to that previous slide, you can see the number on the far right, that's the number of assessment objectives. So now we're drilling down and we're seeing those 6 objectives. That means every one of these has to be implemented, documented, and provable. And what I mean by provable is that there's some evidence that if an assessor or an auditor came to your office today, you would have to be able to instantly show them that this is in effect. And you'd have to show them via documentation. That typically is screenshots or configuration logs. And you'd also have to show them by testing. So when an audit happens, they're looking for both. And if you don't have it, if you're not able to show it right away, that is considered a not met objectives. Objectives are either met or not met. There is no ability to say, working on it, we're going to have it done by Q3. We used to have this, but we just changed our office and we're going to get it up by the end of November. We're going to have it before the new year. That's not how this works. It's a point in time assessment. So each one of these will have a set of how to do it or what they mean if you dig deeper. And there are assessment guides that are put out by the DoD and by the folks that made up CMMC that tell us exactly how to look for these in our system. They are technical in nature, but with all that scoping guidance and all the documentation that's out there, you can get a pretty good sense of if you're doing these things or not. And a lot of them are pretty common sense. So for example, right here in the middle, system access is limited to authorized users. This is a no-brainer. This is just a really easy thing to think, of course I should have this. If somebody came into my company today and we keep engineering schematics for our customers, including the DoD, in a server, a physical server that's on premises, should everyone in the company have it? Folks that are not engineers, folks that are, for example, maybe salespeople or administrative staff? The answer is no, of course they shouldn't have access. But because folks set up their network in the easiest, most accessible way, a lot of times these basic security principles are being ignored. So CMMC is all about getting those basic controls, documenting them, and making them provable for companies. Do you have to have all objectives met? I think I already spoiled this one. The answer is yes. The assessment is a binary choice. It's met or not met. There is no wiggle room here. If an assessment objective is not met, you cannot pass a self-assessment or a third-party assessment. So if you go through your own self-assessment and you say, out of the 59 controls, the objectives that are listed there for level 1, we've got 58. We should just, you know what, just say that we're good to go. Sign off on the self-attestation. We are fine. We should report a perfect score in the SPURS system. We'll fix it as we go. Technically, you've just committed a crime, right? You've just done a false claims act. So we'll get into what the FCA, the False Claims Act, is. But if you're not meeting an objective, the time of fudging it is over, because now we have teeth, we have penalties, and we can basically lose our business or potentially be fined really heavily that could damage our business long term. In the past, there was something called a POAM, Plans of Actions and Milestones. They are no longer permitted at all for level 1. They are in some cases permitted for level 2, but we expect that to go away as this program rolls out fully. And the ones that can be done for level 2 are not major ones. For example, if you don't have your security documented in a form called a system security plan, where you list all the different ways that you're meeting these control objectives, you can't say, hey, can I get a POAM for that one? Can I get a redo? I'll submit that by June 30th of next year. That's not how it works. POAMs, even for level 2, can only be used on some of the really minor controls that are in there. Just a quick note on what POAMs are, so you're not hearing that term and totally confused. A POAM is, if we went through and we looked at the 59 objectives and we found that we weren't compliant in half of them, traditionally you'd be able to make one of these POAMs, a plan of action and milestones, where you said, here's the control that we didn't do, here's how we're going to remediate it, here's who's responsible for remediating it, and here's when we expect it to be done, or here are the phases that we expect it to be done in. So POAMs in the past were a really important part of this process because it let companies say, I still want to be part of this DoD supply chain. I still want to be a contractor. I'm just not 100% ready today. The message should be POAMs are going away. This is it sounds common sense, but it is important to note, you can perform unlimited self-assessments and you don't need to report anything for those self-assessments. So this is like a day one thing to be doing, is the second that you're part of the CMMC ecosystem, you should be doing these self-assessments. We don't know what we're doing well, we don't know what we're doing wrong until we start to look. So it's really important, and this is a conversation I have with small businesses all the time. People come to us, they reach out to us, their existing customers, their customers in other areas that IES has met and dealt with or known for years. Sometimes they're brand new customers that come to us, and I'm the point person for all those conversations. So I get to hear a lot from small businesses. And this is one of the most common things I ask. So what do you have in place today in terms of cybersecurity? The answer is, we have an IT team, or we have an IT person, or we have a managed service provider, a company who sets up laptops. If the printer doesn't work, we would call that person or that outside entity. Okay, is it documented? If I asked like 10 questions about passwords, usernames, logs, auditing, if someone tries to log in 3 times in a row, do you know about that? If they put in the wrong password 10 times in a row, does it lock their account? Does it send a notification? Does it record that information? And the answer I almost uniformly get from small business is I don't know, or I can check in on it, or somebody else does that and I'm not sure the answer. So it's really important to get in this mindset of I can check on this stuff as many times as I want. I can document that and I can just check that delta. What is the change I need to get from my current state to my desired state? And you can just keep working on that process. Self-assessments can also include the use of a third party. It is important to note, even though it's called a self-assessment, the reality is self-assessment means don't have to report it when you finish, right? Until you get that final one that you feel comfortable with. So you can use a managed service provider that you currently work with. You can reach out to a certified third-party audit organization. You can reach out to a CMMC registered practitioner, right? There's this whole ecosystem of folks who are registered or certified in the CMMC world. I am one of these, a registered practitioner. It's kind of the bottom of the pile. It's people that are certified in a variety of cybersecurity standards. They've gone through specialized training for CMMC, and they are able to legally advise and walk people through their own CMMC process. I am not able to be a third-party auditor. This is a much more rigorous set of standards for companies to become certified third-party auditors. So how do you know you're ready to affirm? So if you've got everything done and you're one of those CMMC level 1 companies, what do you do before you actually say, I'm good? You sign a piece of legal paperwork that says, I am good and I have done all the things I'm supposed to do. This is the basic checklist, and this is for level 1. So do you have a system security plan? Has it been reviewed? Do you have a data flow diagram that says where CUI comes into your network, what computers it goes to, what user accounts can access it? Do you have your last self-assessment? When was it last updated? Has it been reviewed since you last created it? Do you have a hardware inventory so you know every single device in your network? These are 2 questions I ask every time I meet with a small business owner. So do you know what lives in your environment? Do you know what software you use? Do you know when it's updated? Do you know what happens to old hardware when you're done with it? Is it destroyed? Is it sent to a local school? Is it donated to Goodwill? Can someone just find an old hard drive? These are the type of basic questions you need to ask yourself before you would sign a document that says, I'm good to go and I'm not worried about being penalized. So you need to complete in every one of these, not 50%, not 70, not 80. It's 100% or nothing. What happens if you don't comply? So if you don't comply, as of today, you are going to be ineligible for future contracts, and there's a potential that your current contract could be lost. So we don't know exactly what will happen on November 10th. This is a phased rollout over the next 3 years. We know that it will appear in new contracts starting on November 10th. However, we don't know if it will be all contracts, 50% of contracts, 25% of contracts, and we don't know how rigorous the CMMC AB, the authorization board, and the DoD will be about going after contracts that already exist. But remember, it's important to note, if you have a current contract with the DoD, you have legally already signed that you're complying with DFARS. So in reality, they could come after you today, even before this November 10th thing comes into effect. What happens if you say, sure, check, 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 check. I've got everything good. My system security plan is perfect. I've got this awesome cybersecurity program. We're doing training of our users. We know what happens when people log in. We have all that stuff saved. We have proof of it, and it's not true. Well, now you're subject to what's called the False Claims Act. False Claims Act has been around for many, many, many years. However, it has nothing to do with cybersecurity traditionally. It just is about lying to the government. That's really the basics of the FCA. However, just in the past couple of years, it's begun to be used against cybersecurity offenders. There is also whistleblower exposure. Whistleblowers can file lawsuits on behalf of the government and receive a share of the settlement, a large settlement. So these fines can be in the millions, and now whistleblowers can get a cut of that check. So we're incentivizing folks to report people who aren't complying. So by the way, an incorrect score or reporting to SPURS, the reporting system, can also be a False Claims Act liability. Are these really happening? Is this a real thing? Yes. If you Google False Claims Act and cybersecurity, you'll come up with a handful of cases just in the last calendar year. And I wanted to point out one that was shared with me recently. This is a company called Morse Corp, or Morse. They were hit with a $4.6 million False Claims Act settlement. Why were they hit with that? A whistleblower alerted the Department of Justice. We don't know if that whistleblower was a competitor, someone who worked for the company, a former employer, just a random person, a customer. We have no idea, right? There's protections that tell us that we won't find out who that person is. Here's what DOJ cited in the report. Multiple points of failure, including use of a non-compliant third-party cloud email host, right? If your data goes out to the cloud, any of that CUI or FCI, that must also comply with CMMC. So if your email or your cloud computing, your cloud hosting does not comply with CMMC, you've broken a rule. They were doing that for about 4 years. Incomplete 800-171, that's that set of rules, cybersecurity controls from 2018 to 2023. Reporting inaccurate cybersecurity compliance scores to DoD, and failure to update scores after third-party revealed audit. This is maybe the most damning one and the one that the report focused on the most. They had a third party come in and tell them, you've got a bunch of stuff that's wrong, and they didn't fix it. They didn't update their score in SPURS. They didn't let a contracting officer know or a prime know that there was something wrong. They just tried to move forward. And of course, that is a no-go for the Department of Justice. So they fine them heavily. There's no slap on the wrist anymore. It is $1 million fine potentially. And in that case, because we saw how big the fine was, this is what the whistleblower got. So this should be scary for small business owners. I don't think a lot of folks know this, that somebody inside your company, potentially a competitor, a former employee, a disgruntled employee, whatever that may be, could be aware of your cybersecurity deficiencies, report you, and be heavily rewarded for reporting that information. Last year also set a record for the most uses of FCA ever in American history. The number was just under 1,000. That's going to grow, right? As CMMC becomes law on November 10th and more companies are subject to this, and people hear about these whistleblower payouts, these incentives, I believe this number will grow. So what can we learn from Morse? Using non-compliant third parties, right? Cloud storage, cloud email. You've got to know if they are CMMC compliant. And there are options out there for both cloud storage and email. They usually cost more. They're at the enterprise level, not the personal level. And we know a lot of small businesses are using the cheapest option here. That is going to change. You're going to have to likely use an enterprise version of that software or that cloud storage. Failure to implement controls. Partial, right? Can't be partial. It's either met or not met, or delayed implementation of the controls is unacceptable. A lack of a written system security plan, also unacceptable. It's really one of the first things that you should be doing is building out your system security plan. And then inaccurate or outdated compliance reporting. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second, and I want to see if we have questions in the chat. Maybe just give a second for people to think about questions of what we just talked about or anything that we might be able to help them with. I see a question here about China, or maybe just some information about China. There is a ton of great information out there about what China's doing, why they're doing it, where they're coming from, why the government there is paying for it, and what they want from us. So I would certainly ask everyone after this, if you're not aware of the threat coming from China, just go look it up. Look up China state-sponsored hacking. You will see tons and tons of articles. And right now they're doing a lot of attacks on our critical infrastructure, which includes manufacturing. So supply chain is a major part of our critical infrastructure in this country. Who remembers what happened during COVID? Like, one of the biggest things that we forgot is just how bad it got here with supply chain. People couldn't buy toilet paper. They couldn't buy hand sanitizer. Here at IES, I can remember this. We had branded little tiny hand sanitizer bottles, and we had staff members here dropping them off. We had the staff members donating them around the state because there was such a demand literally just for hand sanitizer. There was a company of ours who quickly shifted and was able to change their product to be able to make hand sanitizer. They made some other product and they had to shift to make hand sanitizer. So the point is, they're attacking the supply chain because we know that if supply chain goes down, it affects every American of all walks of life. Okay. Remember, keep dropping questions in there. At the end, we'll definitely have time to talk about it. We're at 10:40, so I gotta try and move myself a little faster here. So CMMC timeline. Final rule is in effect. Okay, it was December 10th was when that final rule was in effect, but the phased rollout technically begins on November 10th. So starting on November 10th, CMMC will be in new contracts. Again, phased rollout, so that doesn't mean it's in every contract, but it means it's possible that it can be in every contract. Phase 2 will start exactly 1 year after that. There is language that says they can change that. If there are reasons for delay, they can change that timeline, but we should expect it to be a phase 2 starting on November 10th, 2026. What will it mean? It'll mean that every single level 2 company, which we still don't know how many companies will be level 1 and level 2, but let's just say it's about half roughly, will require a third-party assessment. Those assessments start around $15,000 and they go up significantly from there, depending on how much remediation is required. The other thing to note is there is a very limited number of these companies certified today to do this work. So the line to get in these companies' queue is going to start to very quickly get full. And then by 2028, year 3 of this phase 3-year rollout, CMMC will be in all DoD solicitations and contracts. This means even if you got incredibly lucky and for the next 2 years, you didn't hear a single thing about CMMC, you can no longer work with the DoD if you don't do it by 2028. So key takeaway on that timing. I don't want to say you're safe today, but I want to say you're not legally required until a new contract solicitation you're bidding on includes DFARS CMMC. However, we're already seeing a lot of companies are getting questionnaires, surveys, or email requests from primes on contracts saying, hey, do you have DFARS in place? Are you 800-171 compliant? So primes and the big companies are already aware of this. They're searching their own supply chain right now to get rid of people who are not prepared for this. Once it does get in contracts 10-10-25, you will not be eligible for award without meeting the requirement if it's in that contract. There's no wiggle room, there's no POAMs, or very few exceptions for POAMs. Waiting is no longer a viable option if you depend on the DoD. There is a fear that a lot of companies will drop out, hearing about this big burden that's on them, the cost that's associated. But if you know that DoD contracting is a main source of income for you, or you hope to continue to have that source of income, you've got to do this. The current pool of certified assessors is only 83. Now, I checked this like 2 days ago, so it could be 84 or 85 today. To be honest with you, this is a gold rush that companies around the country are throwing their hat into. So we do know that there will be more assessors over the coming years, but as of today, 83 in the country, in the United States, that are eligible to perform this work. This could create a serious logjam of contractors needing CMMC support. This program was announced years ago, right? CMMC, so companies had time to get it done, but we all know how this works. Like, you just have other concerns as a small to mid-sized business. And until it became a real thing, most companies that I spoke to were really not interested in investing in this process. As soon as they hear that it's in a contract and they're going to lose work, they are going to hit these C3PAOs hard. So beware, there will be a backlog. So how do you do it? What can you start with today? These are my practical steps to get to CMMC compliance. And this doesn't matter where you are in the process. These are the steps that every company, no matter how big or small, no matter how mature your cybersecurity program is, you've got to know, what is our scope? Where does CMMC exist? Is it our entire network, which is in some cases just the way it goes, there's no way to avoid it? Or is it in an enclave, right? That's a specific part, a segmented part of your network or your company that just deals with that information. And then you've got to know what your level is. Again, that goes back to the FCI CUI, but more importantly, the contract needs to specify. So your contract will specify level 1 or level 2 moving forward. Next up, it's readiness assessment. We need to look at ourselves. We need to just keep checking over and over. If you went to a physical trainer tomorrow, like a personal trainer, the first thing they would do on the first day is say, okay, I'm going to walk you through some exercises. I'm going to have you do some lifting weights and some push-ups, whatever that might be. And what they're really doing is a readiness assessment. They're saying, okay, I know where I want to go. I know where I want to take this person. Where are they today? We're going to then remediate those gaps. So after we conduct a readiness assessment, we should have this long list that says met, not met, implemented, not implemented. We've got part of it, but we're not sure how to document it or prove it. This is where you start to fix those things and document everything. At this point, you want to document even the things you're doing poorly and you failed on. Next, you want to schedule your assessment or plan to conduct your own self-assessment for those level 1 folks. And then you need to maintain compliance. Really important note here, CMMC is an ongoing Although it's a point-in-time assessment, when you have a DoD contract, you are agreeing to, in perpetuity, as long as you're part of that contract, maintain compliance. This means, for example, if you added a new cloud server or you created a new physical location, let's say you added a second site to your company, that means that you need to change your SSP, your system security plan. You need to include that new information. So any dramatic change to your network, your security, providers, third-party providers or partners, you would have to change your SSP. I'm going to dig deeper into each one of these right now. So let's take a look at each one. Step 1, define your scope and level. Remember, FCI versus CUI. There is a CUI registry out there on the web that the government keeps, but it's one of the longest, most confusing registries you could possibly find. So it's going to be tough to know if you have CUI or not. You really should think, do I have schematics of a military base that are not public? Do I have engineering schematics? Do I have a drawing, or do I have something that would never be leaked to the public, right? Something that's private. You probably are dealing with CUI. Do you just have a contract and you probably don't deal with that other stuff? You just sell a commercial off-the-shelf product? Then you're probably FCI. Define your assessment scope. What are all the assets that store, process, or transmit that protected information, and any people who touch that information? That means anyone who manages on your behalf, such as a managed service provider, a cloud computing provider, cloud storage provider, they are in scope. So this means if you have a very small MSP and they're not certified in CMMC, they've got to go. You've got to look for a new MSP, or you've got to talk to them about the possibility of them becoming CMMC certified. You've got to look for ways to limit your scope. So you want to minimize access to that data. You want to minimize the number of devices that store the data. Smaller scope means less work, less documentation, less effort to secure it, and a lower overall cost. Step 2, conduct a readiness assessment. So now that we've scoped, we know what's in scope. Now we need to start seeing, does it meet those rules? Does it meet that 59 or that 320 if you're level 2? So you'd have a list and you'd start to say, okay, we're let's say 40 out of 59. You're actually in pretty good shape. If you've never done any of this before and you go around your company and you find that you've got 40 out of 59, you're in a really good spot. The next thing everyone should be thinking about is that checklist. So when you leave here, I am going to be sending out an email that has a checklist for level 1, and everyone should start to look at their level 1 checklist and just start to document and do a basic self-assessment. The level 2 self-assessment is much tougher, and it's going to take IT professionals to help you through this. It's more technical in nature and more in depth. But if you're even just a business owner that has very little technical expertise, you can start looking through a level 1 self-assessment today. Step 3, remediate. You've looked at your scope, you know what's in scope, you've done your readiness assessment, which some people call a gap assessment. You can now prioritize and implement those controls. Remember, document as you go. Evidence is a big part of this process. Remember, controls are either met or not met. I'm working on a CMMC right now, a level 2 with a company that is international but has North Carolina sites. And one of the things we found in this assessment process was, like, for 50% of the questions we asked, they said, we're actually working on that right now. Here's the bad news. It's either today or it's not at all. We can't put down on that self-assessment or a third-party assessment. They're 50% done. They already bought the technology. They bought this really nice new device. It's going to separate the network into guest network and not guest. It's going to detect intrusion. It's a great thing. And we're going to have it by, the end of November. It counts as a 0 today. It's a not met. So remember, practices must be documented and in place today. It's a point-in-time assessment. It's about what you have right now. Then schedule your assessment if needed. If you don't have an IT team that is heavily involved with cybersecurity, you need to probably be thinking third-party today. If you have a large IT department that deals regularly with cybersecurity, maybe they've already done something else in an assessment for another standard that you were legally required to, depending on your industry. Maybe you've already got some of this documentation because you did an ISO. So if you're not sure, talk to your IT team today. Start asking them, do you know what DFARS is? Do you know what CMMC is? Do you think we're going to need outside support? Because you want to get in touch with these folks today. When you choose to work with a third party, be certain that they are certified. Again, this is a gold rush for the folks out there that do this work, and there are going to be lots of online companies that are going to be sending advertisements, email blasts. They're going to have banners when you go search out on the web because they're tracking your cookies. They know you typed into Google CMMC compliance, contracting. And what you're going to need to do is go to the Cyber AB. When you go in there, you can say, I want only people who are registered practitioners. There's me, I'm listed on there. Or you can type in C3PAO and you'll get that list. You can tell me if there's now 85 or if we're up to 90 today. Finally, number 5, remediate and maintain compliance. If you find deficiencies or noncompliance, they must be corrected before you submit. Stop there. Establish a process for continuous improvement by regularly reviewing and updating cybersecurity controls, practices, and policies. Remember, at minimum, you should be looking at this a few times a year. The way a lot of companies do it is say we're going to handle half of our controls in the first quarter, we're going to have half of our controls in the second quarter, we're going to do a self-assessment in the third quarter, and we're going to reattest or submit our score in the fourth quarter. So you don't have to do it all in one day. In fact, that's probably the wrong way to do it. You should break it up and do it throughout the year. Remember, any major change in your environment requires an update to your system security plan and your SPUR score. Your self-assessments and compliance reporting must reflect the current state. You can't tell us what you think you're going to do, what you used to do, what you hope to do, or what you want to do. It's about what you do today. So how do you start this process? Again, I'm going to share resources with you, but you should be out there looking for what's free and what can assist you in this process today. Defense Acquisition University, it's free. It's got online courses in what CUI is. It's got posters. It's got all sorts of things you can download and share with staff members. So part of this process is training is required. They've got some free stuff in there that counts as training, so that will meet your training requirement. Project Spectrum, this is paid for by the government. It has assessment tools, training, consultation. They will actually even answer your questions and tell you what to do if you ask the right questions. 100% free. Global Cyber Alliance, just more free stuff out there. NIST, the folks who created the 800-171 standard, the folks who helped create CMMC, they've got scoping guides, they've got self-assessment guides, they've got as much documentation as you're going to find on this process. Come check out our website. We've got a lot of those same templates that we've downloaded from NIST and from other sources and compiled them. But we've also got courses that I created that are specifically designed to walk you through this process. We, of course, give webinars, we provide training, and we'll do free consultation anytime. That'll be me. So if you call IES or you send us an email or click a link that says get in touch, I'll be the one that reaches out to you and I'll ask you some of these basic questions. I'll walk you through what you need to do. And that free consultation is really just to get you started in your journey. From there, you can choose to work with a third party we can recommend. You can try and work with us to get yourself ready. There's lots of ways that can go. SANS Institute, just another place for lots of free training. And then CISA. Again, they have all sorts of awesome tools. It's a government website, so it's completely trusted. They even have a tool on there that you can go through and it'll ask you the questions that are in a level 1. And then at the end, based on your answers to those questions, it'll give you a report that is exportable to PowerPoint. So you can start to create this self-assessment today with a lot of these tools. Okay, we're probably like right at the time, but we're doing great. We got time for questions now. As you pull up those questions, I'm going to real quick, I want to share something that I just showed to a colleague today. And it's something that we talked about a little earlier. So give me just a second. I want to pull up a different screen and share it with you. And I'll take a look at those questions in just one second. Okay. Share my screen again. Okay, so earlier in the conversation, we talked about how easy it is for AI to create these types of attacks and why it's so important to have defenses in place. I want to show you a prompt that I typed in this morning to show my colleague just how easy this is. I'm on a free version of Gemini, which anyone on the internet could access, and this is how short and simple of a prompt I typed in today. Create a realistic message from the ID department at NC State. That's it. I didn't say anything else. I didn't give it any details about NC State. I didn't give it any details about our IT system. I didn't tell it to whom it should be addressed, just nothing. I just said, just make an IT department message. Look what it did. It gave me options. These are email bodies that I could copy and paste into a phishing email. Plan maintenance of my PAC portal. Guess what? That's the real name of where all of us check our pay stubs, put in our time off, our leave. It's got it like exactly. It knows just how it would actually look from the real folks. It looks like the body of a real email. There's no foreign language, there's no weird characters or symbols. They gave specific dates of when different things would be offline and when you might not be able to access them. and it gave a call to action. I didn't even tell it to do this. Now, prompt engineering is a whole field. If I was doing this for real as an attacker, the prompt would probably be 30 or 40 lines of text because I would tell it exactly who the message should be from, who it should target, what words should be in there, like keywords. I would tell it to put in a link for me, a fake link that goes to my website instead of the real IT website. I could do all sorts of call to actions. Look what it did without ever asking it to do that stuff. It gave another one, phishing alert, security alert. There's a phishing campaign on Duo, which is our real multi-factor authentication company. So it really knows. It went out to the internet and found this information in a matter of milliseconds. It tells people there's a call to action, what to do. If you already clicked on a link, go here. Guess what? We can totally spoof this link so that when somebody clicks this, it goes to Brian's website 123.com instead of going to the real one. I typed in a second one. I said, create a realistic message to send to small businesses in North Carolina. The audience is contractors in the DoD supply chain. In the email, remind them that they need to put their scores in SPURS. That's what the end of this said. They need to put their CMMC assessment in SPURS. And then I said, instead of the SPURS link, send them to my website, ies.com, right? That's our company here. Again, instantaneously, less than a second, boom, there it is. You've got to do this. This is a call to action. It's due today. If you don't do it right away, you're at risk of losing your company's, official DoD contract. Instantaneous. And the prompt that I wrote, I thought of in like maybe 6 seconds. If I was doing this as a real bad guy, that prompt would be so much more refined. I'd practice it over and over. I'd put in the logos of your company or your organization, and I would make this and send it to every person in your organization, and I could tailor to each one of those people, and I could do it in maybe an hour. So think about what the threat is to your company today and start to think about, I'm not really, this isn't real. This CMMC, it's BS. It's a waste of my time. It's not fair that I have to do this. The threat is out there. This stuff is brand new and it's already incredibly powerful. It's only going to get worse and more powerful. So just be really careful to tell yourself, like, I'm the smallest company. No one cares about us. Real quick, I want to show you our website, cybersecurity page, courses, paid courses, but also free courses that will tell you exactly how to fill out an SSP, where to download templates for SSP, links to all of DFARS and CMMC documentation down there. So go in and check that stuff out. You can get in touch with us there. And then last thing I want to show you before we go is, sorry, my screen is right in the way of where it is the Cybersecurity CMMC AB. So this is the authorization board or accreditation board. If you go in here, you can say, I just want to see certified third-party audit. How many are there? Show me every company that can do this for me. And then you can click on these companies, see where they're located. You can see what states they say that they're able to service. Most of them are servicing the entire United States, but some are choosing just to service their close region. So right now, 83 companies in the world are allowed to do this for you, this third-party audit. So just be ready that this number is probably not going to rise as quickly as the 220,000 contractors who are all going to need their help. Okay, that's it. I talked a mile a minute. I crammed a lot in there. Let me go check the Q&A. So first question from Mark Peterson. We tend to be subcontractors to the company that actually has the DoD contract. We do not handle CUI. Would we be asked to meet CMMC 1 or higher? The fast and easy answer is, if you're a sub on a DoD contract, you 100% have to meet CMMC level 1 because that contract itself is FCI. If the company that you're contracting to has not asked you for level 2, they've not sent you a questionnaire, or they've not directly stated it in a contract, then for today, you are safe at level 1. You should be in touch with that company and ask these questions. It's fair game, right? This is the law, and it's out there now on November 10th. You should start asking. We've seen it the other way. For about 2 years now, I've been getting customers call us and say, hey, we got a survey or a questionnaire about this 800-171 or this DFARS. What is it? It's no longer just going to be a questionnaire. It's going to be a real bold question that says, are you ready for CMMC? So be on the lookout for that from the company. Yes, you will receive a copy of the webinar. You will receive a copy of the PowerPoint. And in there, you will have all those links that I just mentioned, but you can also just go to our IES website, click under solutions and go to cybersecurity, and you will see that all the links, all the resources that I mentioned today are also available there. Okay. There was one other question here. I'm going to try and answer that one as quick as I can. From Adam, what are the degrees of separation, if any, if we're providing products who have DoD contracts, but we're not directly supplying DoD? Are we required to be compliant? If you have a DoD contract, you are. If you currently don't have a DoD contract, but you supply to a company that has a DoD contract, technically you're not legally obligated. But what we're seeing is companies who are DoD contractors are trying to shore up their entire supply chain. So there is a chance that that company may choose to only work with folks who are CMMC certified. So the answer there is, from what I'm reading in your question, legally you're probably not today, but should you be to future-proof your relationship with that company and to potentially be eligible for future contracts? My answer would be yes. Okay, 1101, we did it. Is there anything else we can answer before we get off today? Okay.
Thank you, Brian. I'm not seeing any more questions or anything in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.